Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Saturday, December 7th, 2019, and I want to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Alright, guys, we're going to continue looking at the quote unquote giants or large hominins, as I like to call them, state by state, and in this video, we are going to cover Kentucky. And just before I go into that, if you haven't seen my last video of Missing 411, a possible solution, spaceborne mechanoids, I see there's probably some people still hooked on the whole History Channel, Ancient Aliens thing. Look, guys, for your own mental health, okay? This is just a distraction, okay, from what it really is. Alright, if they're willing to kill a guy like Wilhelm Reich, and this guy, Trevor James Consul, you never heard about any of these things, is because that's not what they're pushing. Okay? Hollywood is is overseen by, somebody in the government, okay? It's well known. It's just they're in every newsroom. They're in every media. You got to understand that, okay? And the History Channel, on their own, admits that the stuff they present is not necessarily facts. It's just entertainment, okay? So forget about all that ancient alien stuff and whatnot. It's trying to distract you from what it really is, okay? And, you know, yeah, this guy Wilhelm Reich, if you don't know about him and his orgone cannon and what they did to him, basically, the FBI was finally involved. But this guy was some incredible guy, and you can only imagine if they killed the guy for some baloney became necessary. He had some experiments with Einstein. And he had some problems, okay, and this orgone cannon potentially has some weather altering abilities. And look, here's a couple of mechanoids, biomechanoids for you, as imagined by the creators of Farscape. That's Moya and her son Talon. They screwed around with her to make him into a warship, and her only defense is starburst. And she likes starburst, it's like the speed of light. And Talon has that ability too, except he's a warship. And I was discussing this with Ziggy Dan. I'm going to do another one on UFOs because I want to talk about my own sighting of that and some other weird thing that I saw that just freaked me out. So I'm going to talk about that too because I saw this thing and it just was big, real big. I'm going to talk about it in the Green Mountains, in the dark, dark black forest of the Green Mountains in Connecticut there. Okay, so let's get to the quote-unquote giants in the state of Kentucky. And Kentucky apparently was a place with many, many mounds. And I have to admit that basically every state we've done so far had mounds in it. And mound complexes and many, many mounds. If you look into it, even South Carolina, which we only heard stories about, this particular site, Greater Ancestors didn't have accounts from South Carolina on the quote-unquote giants, but there were many mounds in South Carolina. Okay, so this first one here is this guy with this 7-pound axe. And if you notice the axe here, the ones that they find that are larger than this are designed in the same manner or a similar manner, you see. So when they find these ultra big ones and they see this particular design of it, I mean, this is a 7-pound one, okay? So Look, if I was to tell one of you guys, hey, go out there with this 7 pound stone axe and chop down that tree over there, you're gonna get mighty tired real fast. Okay, axes have got to be light. 4 pounds, that's a good one, good size for an average person today. But 7 pound stone axe with who knows what kind of edge that thing had on it. Who knows if even that's what they're using it for? You don't know, but that's a 7 pounder right there. And this letter from this guy. Enclosed here with is a picture of the writer holding in his hand a tomahawk. This tomahawk belongs to me, and it is at my farm in Virginia. It weighs something over 7 pounds. Was found in Pike County, Kentucky, and given to me by the finder. It might be of sufficient interest to be reproduced in the Ohio archaeologist. You can describe me as a hoarder, quote unquote, as I neither buy or sell relics. Okay, so, as I said, even at 7 pounds, it's mighty big. And the bigger ones seem to have this particular design as well to secure it to a handle. They split the log, or the branch or whatever wood they're using, probably oak, because oak is real strong, stronger than steel. It's not harder than steel, it's stronger than steel. As you notice when you see a car wrapped around an oak tree, and the oak tree, not much happened to it. Okay, so let's read about this giant man wearing jewelry from Simpson County, Kentucky. Antiquities: a giant from a mound on the farm of Eden Burrows near Franklin were exhumed in May 1841 at a depth of over 12 feet. Several human skeletons, one of extraordinary dimensions, was found between what appeared to have been two logs covered with a wooden slab. Many of the bones were entire. The under jawbone was large enough to fit over the jaw, flesh, and all of any common man of the present day. The thigh bones were a full 6 inches longer than those of any man in Simpson County. Teeth, arms, ribs, and all gave evidence of a giant of a former race. Around his neck was a string of 120 copper beads and one bead of pure silver, all perfectly preserved. Another skeleton of smaller dimensions had around his neck a string of ivory beads, about 100 in number. The string which had held the beads was still apparent, though time had destroyed its consistence. Collins Historical Sketches of Kentucky, History of Kentucky, Lewis Collins, 1874, Ohio County, Simpson County. Okay, so that's from Fritz Zimmerman, the Nephilim Chronicles, and, angels in the Ohio Valley, and whatever you want to believe, but I don't particularly believe this whole Nephilim thing. I think it's also just part of the whole cannibalism, giant directive, and kill all giants, and they killed off these people for no more reason than they were funny looking, and they were more advanced in many ways. 8-foot mummy from Lexington, Kentucky. Indian mummy dug out of a cellar on Elkwell Creek, Kentucky. Skeleton of a man 8 feet high. Lexington, Kentucky, November 9th. John Winter of Bell County last week, while digging a cellar at his home on Elkwell Creek, excavated a giant mummy. The mummy was that of a man 8 feet high and wrapped in winding cloth of skins. That's very interesting to me. A winding cloth of skin is just, similar to an Egyptian mummy, I would say, except that they use cloth. They say cloth. Here, a winding cloth of skins. So I don't know what they mean by that, but I've heard of other remains found wrapped in a sort of cloth made of bark. So it'd be interesting what the heck it was, but it says to me, and because I think the whole dating is off with the whole New World bias and everything, it just skews their whole understanding of everything. So, who got this idea from who? I mean, obviously the Egyptians are doing it. These people are doing it too. People in South America are doing it, and they're doing it in China, and they're doing it everywhere. So where did this idea originate? Where did it come from? How old is it really? I mean, and why would it be with these giant peoples or whatnot, which I think that just misattributing to a different date or whatever elements from their culture that they had were adopted by the Homo sapiens, by us. It was placed in a canoe-like coffin and crumbled away upon being exposed to the air. At the head of the giant were a stone hatchet and a few cooking utensils and a large hollow stone, which presumably contained food. At his feet was a skin shield, which had also crumbled to dust. And so that's from Lexington, Kentucky, November. John went to Bell County. And what was the date? Did they give the date here? 1887. The climax, November 11th, 1896. Okay, so it's an area periodical, but, just a whole mummification thing. And again, it crumbled to dust upon being exposed to the air. Don't you know these jerks like Dr. Ken Fader, the supposed writer about hoaxes that have been written about a billion zillion times, and just a hack? Doesn't it occur to him when he says, well, why don't you take up a giant and show everybody? And whatnot? He knows perfectly well what's going to happen. The thing's going to crumble to dust. There'll be nothing left of it, and they can do with it whatever they want because they suck. Quite frankly. Bracken County 7-foot skeletons, ancient burial place, Augusta Chronicle. It is believed by many wise and experienced men that centuries before the Indians, a race of people greatly superior to them in art and knowledge, lived there. That such a race of men occupied portions of Kentucky at some time cannot be doubted. We can only speculate concerning the prehistoric people who dwelt here in fabled mystery during the silent centuries of an unwritten epoch. Very colorful writing by this guy, but it expresses it exactly the way that I feel about it. But it is certain that our little town of Augusta has peculiar historic value, for it is located on a large burying ground of these ancients. Everywhere between the mouths of Locust and Bracken Creeks, skeletons of great size and of great number have been found. When General John Payne dug his cellar, 110 skeletons were taken up in the space of 60 by 70 feet. They were of all sizes, from 7 feet long to the infant. Many arrowheads have been found, and earthenware of clay and pounded mulch. Some of the largest trees of the forest were growing over these remains when the land was cleared in 1792. The Indians had no tradition about these people. We are lost in conjecture as to who they were and how they become extinct. So there you go. And, look, it's just say that today. We don't know anything about these people. What do you learn about these people in your baloney history, false history class, or your, brainwashing academy? It's just, it didn't say anything about it. Wouldn't you want to say about the more sophisticated peoples that inhabited these lands? Wouldn't you want to talk more about them? Wouldn't you want to find out more about them? I guess not. Clark County 12-footer sepulcher unearthed. Sepulcher unearthed containing the skeletons of prehistoric giants. Pine Grove. Evidences of a prehistoric race have been uncovered by Hugh Yates, a prosperous landowner of this county, on his farm a few miles west of here. While excavating beneath a high cliff on his place, Mr. Yates came upon an immense grave containing a human skeleton. The frame was of giant proportions. His curiosity aroused, Mr. Yates called in some neighbors, and armed with picks, they burrowed their way into the side of the cliff and found an ancient sepulchre crowded with human skeletons, some of them larger than the one first found. One of the frames measured 12 feet. Along with the skeletons were found curiously wrought jewels and strange ornaments, while cooking vessels and, get this, musical instruments of queer design were unearthed in great profusion. What the heck did it mean by that? I'm not saying like a rattle or whatever it is. Musical instruments of queer design, and it was unearthed in great profusion. I guess everything was there. But what do you mean by that? I would love to see what these musical instruments of queer design were. But I'm sure they got lost somewhere out the back door when it was, is today garbage night? I don't know, at the museum. Just throw it in the dumpster. The diggers are still at work and expect to make even more important finds. I bet. And where'd they go? I don't know. Somewhere. Who cares? Okay, the Citizens from the Citizen, December 1911. Okay, we're in the 20th century now. Trigg County, 8-footer and rusted tomahawk. J.W. Marquess off Roaring Springs, Trigg County, in making an excavation on his place, came across some old Indian graves, from one of which a human skeleton of giant dimensions was unearthed. The skeleton measured nearly 8 feet and was perfectly preserved, except the feet were gone. Every tooth was in the large mouth. Buried with the skeleton was a rusted tomahawk. A rusted tomahawk? That would sort of imply iron to me, because you know that copper oxidizes green, and bronze, doesn't rust. It gets oxidized, but maybe that's what they mean. I don't know. But if it was a rusted tomahawk, that would sort of suggest iron. And I go over this in one of my previous videos. I forget which one, but I was reading from C.W. Saram's book about how he recounted of some author who wrote about iron production in North America in the ancient past. And Saram had noted about how serious the work that the person that he referred to undertook the whole thing. And, Saram was one of those guys who's saying, hey, take a look at this. Buried with the skeleton were a rusted tomahawk, a piece of pottery with a woman's picture on it, also a copper coin 5 inches in diameter with 2 circles, one containing 28 hieroglyphics, the other 52. And again, we hear about hieroglyphics and whatever were made of these hieroglyphics. Does anybody know? Again, why isn't academics concentrated on the more sophisticated races of people who evidently were here and demand more research, apparently, to this, so it can be taught to kids in school? They just learn about the Native Americans, well, they weren't the only people who were here. And apparently they were not of as much sophisticated as these people were in a lot of respects. So I don't understand the whole thing, to be honest with you, but nobody does. Jefferson County, 9-footer, the early American giant. The conduct of the prehistoric races of this continent in omitting to leave any record which could establish their origin and customs was extremely thoughtless. They managed such things vastly better in Europe. When the cave dwellers grew tired of their subterranean existence and decided to die, they had some consideration for those who were to come after them. They selected specimens of the bones of all the animals of the period and drew portraits of themselves on the handles of their toothbrushes, and then laid down to die surrounded by these mute witnesses of their fondness for art and animals. Thus, when the British explorer finds a cave dweller skeleton with its accompanying cavity cabinet of curiosities, he is once enabled to assert that the cave dwellers were contemporary with bears and toothbrushes, and has the great satisfaction of knowing that as soon as he can discover the date at which the cave bear flourished in the British Islands, he will know the date at which the cave dweller lived. In North America, on the contrary, the earliest residents were sublimely selfish and cared nothing whatever for the archaeological feelings of subsequent generations. When a mound builder died, he neither collected any extraneous bones nor took the slightest care of his own. Had he requested his surviving friends to look upon his corpse in the light of an antiquarian cornerstone and to bury it with a box containing the newspapers and coins of the period, there would be some pleasure in digging him up. Or if he had simply directed that his name and destination should be inexpensively stenciled on one of his largest bones, he could have saved us a great deal of unprofitable discussion as to his real character. But he did nothing of the sort, and in consequence, when we now find his skeleton, it is useless even to the coroner, and is entirely indistinguishable from the ordinary Indian skeleton. The public will be unpleasantly reminded of this callous indifference to the future on the part of the prehistoric Americans by the recent discovery of 3 unusual fine skeletons in Kentucky. A Louisville paper asserts that 2 men lately undertook to explore a cave which they accidentally discovered not far from that city. The entrance to the cave was small, but the explorers soon found themselves in a magnificent apartment, richly furnished with the most expensive and fashionable stalactites. In a corner of this hall stood a large stone family vault, which the 2 men promptly pried open. In it were found 3 skeletons, each nearly 9 feet in height. The skeletons appear to have somewhat frightened the young men, for one, seeing so extensive a collection of bones, they immediately dropped their torch, and subsequently wandered in darkness for 36 hours before they found their way back to daylight and soda water. Now it is evident that these gigantic skeletons belong to men very different from the men of the present day. A skeleton 8 feet and 10 inches in height would measure fully 9 feet when dressed even in a thin suit of flesh. The tallest 9-foot giant of traveling circus is rarely more than 6 feet 4 inches high in private life, and without his boots, and even giants of this quality are scarce and dear. The 3 genuine 9-foot men of Kentucky must have belonged to a race that is now entirely extinct, and hence it would be a matter of very great interest if we could learn who and what they were. It would be difficult to excuse the indifference of these giants to our rational curiosity. They could afford to be buried in a gorgeous family vault, and hence could have easily afforded to decorate the vault with plain and inexpensive door plate. They could afford to pay the cost of having their heavy bodies carried a long distance into the cave before they were deposited in the vault, and it is reasonably certain that they did not obtain possession of so eligible a burial place without paying a large price to the local cemetery company. And yet they did not take the trouble to furnish us with the slightest clue to their identity. Not only did they omit to put a door plate on their vault, but they failed to deposit a visiting card or worthless certificate of petroleum stock or anything whatever bearing the name of either of them in the tomb. Not so much as a boot or a paper collar, a gilt sleeve button, or a cheap jackknife was buried with them. When we contrast this selfish parsimony with the generous forethought of the cave dweller who died with a bear skull in one hand, a rhinoceros horn in the other, and went with his pockets stuffed full of engraved toothbrush handles merely in order to please remote posterity, we can only blush for the selfish want of the public spirit of the early American giant. It's very humorous. Of course, the tale of the 2 young Kentuckian explorers needs confirmation. They may have made their alleged discovery while in an advanced state of hot whiskey, or they may have manufactured their skeletons before finding them, with the view of adding to the attractions of Centennial Exhibition, whose panoramas of eccentric skeletons have frequently been seen in Kentucky and elsewhere by men who have looked too frequently upon the whiskey when it is hot and flavored with sugar and lemon peel. And the story of the Cardiff Giant reminds